The first Catholic Mass in the Philippines is an important part of Philippine history since it marked the beginning of Christianity in the country. Magellan, a Portuguese explorer working for Spain, was leading an expedition to find a westward route to the Spice Islands, which is now part of Indonesia. While navigating through the Philippines, his crew and the local people celebrated this Mass, which took place on Easter Sunday, a significant day in the Christian calendar. This moment is remembered as the formal introduction of Christianity to the Philippines. For many years, the site of this historic Mass has been debated. Traditionally, historians argue that it happened either on Limasawa Island in Leyte or in Masao in Butuan. However, as the Philippines celebrated 500 years of Christianity, other locations were suggested as possibilities. These include Baog Island, Suwatan, and Bud Promontory, all of which are in Butuan. The debate is still unresolved because different historical documents and interpretations exist, leading to these different claims. Antonio Pigafetta was one of the few survivors of Magellan's expedition and kept a detailed journal of what happened. His account is the most important written record of the first Mass. He described the event in great detail, including the participation of local leaders and how they symbolically accepted Christianity. These details have helped historians piece together what happened. Pigafetta mentioned two local kings or leaders named Raya Calambo and Raya Siani. These leaders played a crucial role in the event, and their willingness to participate in the Christian ceremony suggests that they respected Magellan and his men. Before the Mass started, they participated in Christian customs like kissing the cross and kneeling at a key moment during the Mass, which is the elevation of the host when the bread is lifted as a symbol of Christ's body. This was a symbolic gesture of respect and openness toward Christianity. Once the Mass concluded, the two kings showed their acceptance of the Christian faith in a symbolic way, likely agreeing to cooperate with Magellan and his crew. In return, Magellan erected a large cross on the highest point of the island. This act of putting up a cross was a symbolic claim over the land, marking it as a Christian territory and representing unity between the explorers and the local people. Pigafetta's descriptions of the island, its geography, people, and natural resources are valuable in trying to identify where this event took place. He describes the island as a rich in natural resources, implying it was a fertile, prosperous area. Additionally, he portrayed the people as peaceful and willing to cooperate with Magellan and his crew. Historians look at these descriptions to try and match them with specific locations in the Philippines. This event is not just a religious milestone, but also a symbol of early contact between Europeans and Filipinos. While the debate over the exact location of the first Mass continues, Pigafetta's account provides us with the most reliable clues to piece together this historical puzzle.
So the main issue of the debate centers the interpretation of Mazua in Pigafetta's account. This sparked a long-standing debate between two primary claims. So let's define what is Mazawa. So Mazawa refers to the island where Magellan's expedition reportedly held the first Catholic Mass in the Philippines in 1521. The Mass marked the introduction of Christianity to the archipelago and is considered as a significant moment in country's history. The event is often commemorated as the beginning of the Christianization of the Philippines. First Mass was officiated by Friar Pedro Valderrama, the Andalusian chaplain of the fleet, on March 31, 1521. So, Masao, Batuan is located in Mindanao Province, Agusan del Norte. So, Masao, Batuan. These claims, which was widely observed between the 17th and 19th centuries, argues that Mazawa refers to Masao in Batuan. However, historians note that no primary sources mention Limasawa Island directly. So, Limasawa Island is located in southern part of Leyte. Limasawa Islands, according to Pigafetta's account, read alongside Francisco Albo's diary, suggests that the islands where the first mass took place correspond to a latitude similar to that Limasawa, which is located in Sarog, Leyte. Proponents to this view argue that the river near Masao Batuan is not mentioned in the records, further favoring Limasawa. So the current status of the debate. While the debate currently leans in favor of Limasawa, the people of Butuan remains resolute in defending their claim, with historical evidences and cultural faith. Despite the uncertainty regarding the exact location, one undeniable fact is that the Magellan's voyage introduced Christianity to the Philippines, sparkling a transformation that continues to shape the nation's identity today. So, evidence that tell it happened in Masao. So, this is based on my research. So, number one, Mazawa can be found in Butuanan language, meaning bright or light. So, number two, the shape of the isle is almost circular to 3 to 4 leagues, translate to an area up to 3,930 hectares. In contrast, Limasawa is only 698 hectares. So first, let's define what is league. So a league is an old unit distant that was commonly used in maritime navigation. One league is equivalent to about 3 nautical miles or approximately 5 to 6 kilometers. This measurement originated from the distance a person could walk in 1 hour, but at sea it refers to the distance a ship could travel in an hour under certain conditions. Although leagues are no longer used in modern navigation, they were a standard way to describe distance between location over water in the past. So, according to Antonio's Pegafetta account, the distance of Cebu to Mazawa was 35 leagues, meaning 140 miles. So, the distance from Limasawa to Cebu is only 80 miles. So, according to historian Gregorio Zaid, it is high time for contemporary historians around the Philippines and the government to correct their mistake and accept that the first Christian Mass was celebrated in Masao, Butuan, Agusan del Norte, and not in Limasawa, Leyte, on Easter Sunday, March 31, 1521. Butuan City and Historical Foundation Inc. found 22 pieces of scientific evidence to 10 to 1,600-year-old balanghay recovered. So, balanghay, di ba? Yung gamay nga bangka. And for the conclusion, the debate over the site of the mass is deeply rooted in historical, geographical, and cultural interpretations. Whether the site was Limasawa or Masao, the significance of these events as the beginning of the Christianity in the Philippines remains unchanged. As new interpretations and evidence come to light, the debate will continue to evolve, reflecting the complexities of historical inquiry and national identity. Despite the ongoing debate, the most important outcome of Magellan's voyage is undisputed. It introduced Christianity to the Philippines. This introduction had a lasting impact, shaping the religious and cultural identity of us Filipino. That's all. Thank you.
The 1872 Cavite Mutiny remains a contentious event in Philippine history, with varying perspectives from Spanish and Filipino sources. The primary accounts from Spanish historian Jose Montero y Vidal, Governor General Rafael Izquierdo, Filipino scholar Dr. Trinidad Hermenegildo Pardo de Tavera, and French writer Edmond Plochot. Well, the Cavite Mutiny is one of the important events in Philippine history. Walang 1896 revolution na naganap kung wala ang 1872 Cavite Mutiny. Mutiny is a rebellion against authority. Comes from an old verb mutin, which means revolt. This event involved Filipino workers, primarily soldiers and laborers, who were protesting against unfair treatment and the new tax imposed by the Spanish colonial authorities. Many felt that their low wages and poor working conditions were intolerable. It became a significant event that laid the groundwork for future movement towards independence and highlighted the need for Filipinos to unite against colonial rule. Let's now talk about the Spanish perspective. Both Vidal and Izquierdo described the mutiny as an organized attempt to overthrow the Spanish colonial government. They attribute the uprising to the dissatisfaction of workers at the Cavite arsenal after the abolition of their privileges, including tax exemptions and forced labor exemptions. Izquierdo further claimed that the Filipino clergy were behind the rebellion intending to promote secularizations and replace Spanish friars. The mutiny, they argued, was fueled by liberal ideas from the Spanish Revolution and was part of a larger conspiracy to challenge Spanish rule. This narrative justified the execution of the three Filipino priest Gomborza on February 17, 1872, while Spanish perspectives Jose Montero y Vidal, he is a Spanish historian, they highlighted that it is an attempt of the Indios who overthrew the Spanish government in the Philippines. Meanwhile, Governor General Rafael Izquierdo official report to the King of Spain magnified the event and made use of it to implicate the native clergy, which was then active in call for secularization. Well, secularization, it means nagkaroon na ng magandang katungkulan ang mga native clergies o ang Pilipinong pare. Dito sa Pilipinas na hindi na nagustuhan ng mga priling Espanyol. While according to Spanish perspective, they say that 1872 Cavite Mutiny was premeditated, ibig sabihin ay plinado ng mabuti, while the account that detailed that on January 20, 1872, the district of Sampaloc celebrated the Fest of Virgin Loreto came with it, and from the fireworks display, the Cavitinos mistook this the signal to commence with the attack. 200 men was led by Sergeant Lamadrid attack. Spanish officers at sites and seized the Arsenal Izquierdo upon learning the attack, ordered reinforcement of the Spanish forces in Cavite to quell the revolt. The revolution was easily crushed. When Manilianos who were expected to aid the Caviteños did not arrive, in result, the leaders of the plot were killed. Father Gomez, Borgus, and Zamora were tried by a court-martial and sentenced to be executed, and other Filipino lawyers were suspended from the practice of law, arrested, and sentenced to life imprisonment at the Marianas Island. The Spanish authorities viewed this action as a way to maintain order and demonstrate their power over the island, an attempt of the Indios to overthrow the Spanish government in the Philippines.
Dr. Taveras' account highlights that the Cavite Mutiny of 1872 was driven by discontent over General Izquierdo's sudden imposition of taxes and the removal of long-held privileges for Filipino workers and soldiers. Tavera contends that Izquierdos and the Spanish friars used the mutiny as an excuse to suppress reformist movements, particularly targeting the Filipino clergy, who were advocating for secularization and reforms. He also suggests that the friars feared losing control over education and the governance, prompting them to use the mutiny as a way to maintain their dominance amidst potential reforms from Spain. The varying facts highlight widely accepted points regarding the 1872 Cavite Mutiny despite differing perspectives. Filipino workers and the soldiers in Cavite were dissatisfied with the removal of their privileges, which had previously exempted them from taxes and forced labor. General Izquierdo's strict policies alienated many Filipinos, and the Spanish central government, relying on the biased reports from Izquierdo and the friars, failed to conduct a proper investigation. The Spanish friars, fearing reforms from Madrid that threatened their control over education and governance, were particularly anxious. Tensions were further fueled by the secularization movement, in which Filipino clergy sought control over local parishes, leading to clashes with the friars. Filipino responded to these perceived injustices, and the execution of the Gomborza priest intensified anti-Spanish sentiments, inspiring future movements for independence. This event is now seen as a key moment that helped set the stage for the Philippine Revolution and the eventual independence of the Philippines in 1898.
Spanish version of the Cavite Mutiny of 1872 by Jose Montero y Vidal as cited by Antonio Tamayo, 2018. In his Historia General de Filipinas, 1895, Spanish historian Jose Montero y Vidal represent a Spanish-centric version of the 1872 Cavite Mutiny, portraying it as a significant rebellion aimed at overthrowing Spanish colonial rule in the Philippines. His account was criticized by Filipino historian Dr. Trinidad Hermigildo Pardo de Tavera for being biased and obfuscation, framing the mutiny as a vast conspiracy involving the Filipino leaders and clergy. Montero y Vidal attributed the mutiny to several causes, including the removal of privileges from Cavite arsenal workers, liberal ideas stemming from the Spanish Revolution, and the anti-monarchical propaganda. He suggested that Filipino clergy, out of their resentment towards the friars, supported the mutiny alongside civilians and soldiers. Montero y Vidal claimed that the plan was to assassinate Spanish officers and the civilians, starting with the Captain General, but it failed due to the unforeseen circumstances. On January 20, 1972, soldiers at the Cavite Arsenal, mistakenly believing a local celebration's fireworks were a signal to revolt, assassinated their commander. General Izquierdo responded by sending troops to suppress the uprising, which ended on January 22 with the defeat of the mutineers.
Montero y Vidal's narrative emphasized the revolt's failure and the government's decisive response, framing the mutiny as a consequence of Filipino discontent and revolutionary ideas, with heavy penalties imposed to restore order. The mutiny's suppression also led to the disbandment of Filipino military regiments and the reinforcement of Spanish troops in the Philippines. The Filipino version of the Cavite Mutiny of 1872 by Dr. Trinidad Hermigildo Pardo de Tavera presents a view of the mutiny that challenges Spanish accounts, particularly their portrayal of the event as a revolutionary conspiracy for independence. According to Pardo de Tavera, the incident was essentially a response to Governor General Rafael D. Izquierdo's harsh policies, especially the abolition of long-standing privileges that exempted Filipino workers in the Cavite Arsenal from paying taxes and engaging in forced labor law. This policy led to unsatisfaction and eventually incited some soldiers and workers to rise in arms on January 20, 1872. Dr. Pardo de Tavera claims the 1872 Cavite Mutiny was a response to Governor Izquierdo's harsh policies, leading to the revolt on January 20.
Pardo de Tavera emphasized that the mutiny was more of a labor protest than an organized political movement aimed at Philippine independence. However, Spanish authorities and friars exaggerated the incident into a broad conspiracy, using it as an excuse to suppress Filipino reformists and maintain colonial control. The mutiny became a pretext for the execution of prominent Filipino priests such as Father Burgos, Zamora, and Gomez, who had opposed friar control. It also led to the exile of several other Filipinos leaders, reinforcing the friars' influence in the colony and deepening the divide between Filipino and Spaniards. In the broader context, Pardo de Tavera argued that the mutiny, too small in scale, had far-reaching effects. The Filipino repression that followed fueled growing Filipino resentment against Spanish colonial rule, eventually sowing the seeds for future revolutionary movement. What had begun as a simple protest against labor conditions became a catalyst for the rise of Filipino nationalism, due in large part to the excessive response by the Spanish authorities. What this means is that the mutiny was primarily driven by workers' grievance, especially soldiers and laborers in the Cavite Arsenal, who were unhappy with their poor conditions and the unfair treatment they received from their Spanish superiors. It was not initially about pushing for independence from Spain, but rather about addressing the labor issues. The Spanish authorities, especially the friars, saw the mutiny as a threat to their power. They exaggerated the scale of the mutiny, portraying it as a rebellion aimed at overthrowing the Spanish rule. This was in fact not the case, but they used this incident to target Filipino reformists and leaders who were pushing for change within the colonial system. As part of the Spanish response, three Filipino priests, Father Burgos, Zamora, and Gomez, were accused of being involved in the mutiny and were executed. These priests were vocal in their opinions to the dominance of Spanish friars in the Philippines, and their deaths became a symbol of the repression faced by Filipinos under the Spanish rule. Many other Filipino leaders were exiled after the mutiny, further increasing the distance between Filipinos and their Spanish rulers. The friars gained more influence, and the divide between the two groups grew even more intense. This tension would later contribute to the rise of nationalist sentiment. Even though the mutiny itself was relatively small and quickly suppressed, its impact was much larger. The way the Spanish authorities' response to the mutiny helped ignite a growing resentment among Filipinos. This resentment gradually evolved into stronger for independence, contributing to the emergence of the Filipino revolutions. Decades later, the overly harsh response to the mutiny fueled the Filipino anger and became a turning point in the movement's independence. The execution of the priests and the repressive action taken by the Spanish government awakened a sense of unity and national consciousness among Filipinos. This would eventually lead to the formation of revolutionary movement like Katipunan and the Sogos eventually struggles for independence.
January 20, 1872. Cavite Mutiny is the brief uprising of 200 Filipino troops and workers at the Cavite Arsenal, which became the excuse for Spanish repression of the embryonic Philippine nationalist movement. Ironically, the harsh reaction of the Spanish authorities served ultimately to promote the nationalist cause. The mutiny was quickly crushed, but the Spanish regime under the reactionary Governor Rafael D. Izquierdo magnified the incident and used it as an excuse to clamp down on those Filipinos who had been calling for governmental reform. Several Filipino intellectuals were seized and accused of complicity with the mutiners. After a brief trial, three priests, Jose Burgos, Jacinto Zamora, and Mariano Gomez, were publicly executed. By three subsequently became martyrs to the cause of Philippine independence. Governor Izquierdo's official report. Jose Montero y Vidal, a prolific Spanish historian, documented the event and highlighted it as an attempt of the Indians to overthrow the Spanish government in the Philippines. Several Filipino intellectuals were seized and accused of complicity with the mutineers. After a brief trial, three priests, Jose Burgos, Jacinto Zamora, and Mariano Gomez, were publicly executed. The three subsequently became martyrs to the cause of the Philippine independence. Oh. Governor Izquierdo's official report. Jose Montero y Vidal, a prolific Spanish historian, documented the event and highlighted it as an attempt of the Indians to overthrow the Spanish government in the Philippines. Meanwhile, Governor General Rafael Izquierdo's official report magnified. Meanwhile, Governor General Rafael Izquierdo's official report magnified the event and made use of it to implicate the Najib clergy, which was then active in the call for secularization. Montero and Cotardo scored out in the abolition of privileges enjoyed by the workers of Cavite Arsenal, such as a non-payment of tributes and exemption from forced labor, were the main reason of the revolution. Izquierdo blamed the unruly Spanish press for stockpiling malicious stockpiling, malicious propaganda grasped by the Filipinos. He reported to the King of Spain that the rebels wanted to overthrow the Spanish government to install a new Hari, in the likes of Fathers Burgos and Zamora. Escardo added that the native clergy enticed other participants by giving them charismatic assurance that their fight will not fail because God is with them, coupled with the handsome promises of rewards such as employment, wealth, and ranks in the army. Meanwhile, Governor General Rafael Escardo's official report magnified the event and made use of it to implicate the native clergy, which was then active in the call for secularization. Montero and Escardo scored out that the abolition of privileges enjoyed by the workers of Cavite Arsenal, such as non-payment of the tributes of exemption from forced labor, were the main reason of the revolution. Escardo blamed the unruly Spanish press for stockpiling, malicious propagandas grasped by the Filipinos. He reported to the King of Spain that the rebels wanted to overthrow the Spanish government to install a new Hari in the likes of Fathers Burgos and Zamora. Esquerdo added that the native clergy enticed other participants by giving them charismatic assurance that their fight will not fail because God is with them, coupled with handsome promises of reward such as employment, wealth, and ranks in the army. So, Esquerdo, in his report, lambasted the Indios as gullible and possessed an innate propensity for stealing that. They insinuated that the conspirators of Manila and Cavite planned to liquidate high-ranking Spanish officers to be followed by the massacre of the friars. The alleged preconcerted signal among the conspirators of Manila and Cavite was the firing of rockets from the walls of Intramuros. Allegedly, those in Cavite mistook the fireworks as the sign for the attack, and just like what was agreed upon, the 200-man contingent headed by Sergeant Lamadrid launched an attack targeting Spanish officers and seized the arsenal. With the news reached the iron-fisted Governor Escardo, he hurriedly ordered the responses.
Esquerdo believed that a newspaper called El Ica Filipino made Filipinos want to rebel against Spain. Spanish officials were scared that new ideas about freedom and democracy would spread and make people fight against them. Esquerdo thought the rebellion was a sign of a bigger problem for Spain's control over the Philippines. To stop the rebellion, the Spanish government watched people closely and prepared for any more fighting. El Ico Filipino was a newspaper published in the Philippines during the Spanish colonial period. It was known for its advocacy of reforms and its criticisms of the Spanish government. It was written in Spanish, which was the language of the ruling class at the time. The newspaper called for changes in the way Spain governed the Philippines, such as more representation for Filipinos in government and better economic opportunities. It criticized the abuses of Spanish officials and the injustices faced by Filipinos under Spanish rule. El Ico Filipino played a significant role in raising awareness of Filipino grievances and inspiring the nationalist movement that eventually led to Philippine Revolution. While it was written in Spanish, its message resonated with many Filipinos who were yearning for change. It helped shape public opinion and contributed to the growing movement for independence from Spain. They didn't see the rebellion as just a small fight about work. They thought it was a serious threat to their power. Esquerdo report shows that the Spanish government wanted to keep control of the Philippines. Instead of saying they had done something wrong, they blamed the rebellion on secret plots and outside influences. We've explored a lot of different aspects of the Cavite Mutiny, from the controversial side of the first mass to the different perspectives of the Spanish and Filipinos. It's clear that this event was a turning point in the Philippine history, sparking a wave of unrest and ultimately contributing to the fight for independence. The Spanish government under Governor Izquierdo saw the mutiny as a serious threat to their control and responded with harsh measures. However, the Filipinos saw it as a fight for justice and better treatment under Spanish rule. By understanding these different perspectives, we gain a deeper appreciation for the complexities of this historical event and its lasting impact on the Philippines.